بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على عبده ورسوله نبينا وإمامنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين أما بعد. Chapter number 80, the author Nawawi rahimahullah ta'ala says باب وجوب طاعة ولاة الأمر في غير معصية وتحريم طاعتهم في المعصية. The obligation of obeying the rulers as long as it isn't a means of sin, as long as it isn't sin to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as long as it doesn't include disobeying Allah, and the impermissibility of obeying them when it includes disobeying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Once again, it is obligatory to obey the rulers as long as they do not command you, do not order you, they don't put upon you that which entails disobedience to Allah. And on the opposite side, it is unlawful, it is haram to obey them when they command you, when they order you, when they tell you to do things which include and which force you to disobey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Tayyib, clear, inshallah. The previous chapter and many other discussions and talks as well with regards to something which is extremely important in and outside of Islam. Rulership, leadership, politics, leading and governing men, war and peace, economy, state, nation, security, and the list goes on. When we talk about a leader and those who are being led, the responsibilities and the duties of the leader, the responsibilities and the duties of the led, the rights of the leader, and the rights of the led people, of the subjects, etc. Okay, how do we get leaders in and outside of Islam? The quality of leaders, etc. How do we change or switch or remove leaders or leadership? Succession, and the list goes on and on and on. Extremely important with regards to the make of the human being, the psychology of humanity, of humans, right? People are born leaders. Some people are born to follow. Some people aspire or wish or they're turned into leaders, and others are forced to become followers, etc. Okay, so that's a very long discussion, since leadership, leading, following, commanding, ordering, obeying is something which is so central to the human race. Of course, Islam has spoken on it. Of course, Islam has talked about it, because Islam is a perfect way of life and a perfect way of death. Islam isn't just a faith. It's not something which is convenient for one day out of the week, 1 week out of the month, 1 year, or 1 month out of the year. It's for every single time your lungs, right, provide you with oxygen and air. Every pump and beat, every thump of the heart, the blood flowing through the body, Islam gives you what to do and what not to do. It's a complete system. And any claim of Islam or any claim or any dawah organization claiming to call to Islam that doesn't include every single aspect of life and of death, the whole entire experience of the human being, then it is an incomplete dawah call at best. It's good, it's positive, it's proven, but it's incomplete. Let alone this dawah movement is false. All right. And if the shoe fits, then you have to wear it. It's just that simple. People claim that this dawah movement is Islam. It's nothing different. They say it's nothing different. It's just a different word for Islam. That's what it really means. It's a different word for Islam. But you don't talk about so many things. So how can it be Islam if you have ignored and neglected so many things? Well, we don't talk about that right now, or we focus on this. So you don't talk about certain things that are in the Quran and Sunnah. It's not a part of your agenda, so your dawah is incomplete. And of course, it's not one group. There are many groups. many groups, whatever name or title is given. They only focus on one aspect, one slice of the pie. It's incomplete. It's not a whole pie. You go to the pizza parlor, you get a slice, a plain slice, 2 slices. You can get mushrooms, Sicilian, buffalo chicken, inshallah, halal, sausage, pepperoni, halal, right? Or pork, whatever. But you can get whatever slice you want, how many slices you want. And regardless of how big the slices are and what toppings you have in those slices, onion, green pepper, whatever, vegetable, whatever, black olive, whatever you're into. And you can put your salt, your garlic, your Parmesan cheese. It's not a whole pie until it's a whole pie. So right now, my Dawah organization or my spiritual movement only focuses on the inside or only on the outside. We only talk about spirituality. We only talk about purification of the soul. We only talk about innovations and refuting the people of innovations and avoiding the people of innovations and the virtues of the scholars and Tawheed. We only talk about Islamic politics and organizing. We only talk about etc. Whatever the Dawah call is. You're only taking, at best, 1 or 2 slices from the pie. And the only correct da'wah, which is totally correct, is that which presents a full pie. Everything is spoken on and talked about and we call to with the prioritizing of things. So we talk about Tawheed and Aqidah, Allah's names and attributes. We talk about Sunnah and worship, Ibadah. We talk about Islamic clothing, appearance, hijab, beard. We talk about purification of the soul, tawbah, dhikr, dunya, zuhud. We talk about Islamic organization, finance, economy. We talk about fighting, wala wal bara, disassociating ourselves from the kuffar, etc. Kull shay, everything. And if you don't talk about everything and call and invite and teach and spread the whole message of Islam, your Dawah movement is incorrect. At worst and at best, it's incomplete. It's just a slice. That's all it is. And a slice could be delicious. But you cannot claim that it is a 16-inch, 20-inch, 24-inch pie because it's not. So stop saying that. So many Dawah organizations, as we mentioned before, they become allergic when anything like this is discussed. Or if they do happen to talk about politics and leadership, then it's one-sided, narrow-minded, halfway, half-hearted, half-willed type of discussion that only suits an agenda for a person. Obey the rulers, and that's it. As we explained in the previous chapter. And not talking about the rights and the responsibilities of the ruler. And not talking about the rights and the things that the subjects are supposed to receive. And that's not discussed. All right. People say, well, the people aren't ready for this. We're not ready to talk about, jihad. We're not ready to the Muslims aren't ready. Okay, I tell you, look at the ummah. How many people don't pray? You're right. How many women don't wear hijab? Sahih. How much riba, how much messed up stuff is there? You're absolutely right. But when will they be ready? And when will you call to it? How are you getting them ready? What are you going to do to make them ready? To embrace and accept the complete system of Quran and Sunnah. When? You said the same thing 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 40 years ago. You were saying the same thing. We called to Tawheed. We called to Tawheed first. That was 3-4 generations of decades ago. Now what? You still saying the same thing? So it's not the fact that the Muslims aren't ready or the Muslims we have to prioritize things. That's correct. Anyone who travels the world, he knows the messed up state of the Muslim ummah. وَلَا حَوْلَ وَلَا قُوَّةَ إِلَّا بِاللَّهِ وَمَا أُبَرِّئُ نَفْسِي. I can't exclude myself, my own problems and sins and faults. This is a reality. But is there even a sincere intention? If you ask the Muslim today, is it obligatory for the Muslims to have a Khalifa? Some of them will say, no, it's not obligatory. Some of them will say, yes, it is obligatory. It's consensus that it's obligatory. And some will say, etc. Okay, well, what are we doing to make that obligation a reality? Tafaddal. Please explain what you, this caller, this sheikh, this scholar, what are you doing to turn that theory into practice? Oh, the Muslims aren't ready right now. It's too difficult. It's impossible. But what are you doing to make it possible? You aren't. And the same applies to many other things in Islam. Jihad fi sabilillah. Muslims can't fight. There are conditions for jihad. What are you doing to realize that? You aren't doing anything because you don't want to. You don't want to. And the only time jihad comes up is if it's self-defense. The only time jihad comes up if it's fighting a country that the scholars agree to fight based off of political goals and means, which is clear as day. I mean, you can, whether you're talking about the United States or Saudi Arabia, fighting the Russians, right, is jihad, right? The Americans, they supported and funded the mujahideen, they called them, the mujahideen, right? And then it was inconvenient and against the political goal and aim, then there's terrorists. Khawarij, same game that was played in the 70s, 80s to this very day, right? Saddam fought the Iranians. He's a hero, he's a champion, strong man in the Middle East. But when he invaded Kuwait, we have to free the people of Kuwait, liberate the people of Kuwait. Why didn't you liberate the people of Iran? He fought them for 10 years. Did he not use the same missiles and MiG fighters and gas? So the lies and the hypocrisy of people when it comes to this discussion is beyond belief. And of course, it all comes from not keeping it real and going against the teachings of the Quran and Sunnah. All right, so that's very important. Now, many people are ignorant, and they think and they feel that if you command the people to obey their rulers, follow their rulers, listen to their rulers, you're a puppet, you're a bootlicker, you're a scholar of the Sultan, you're a tail of the mule, the Sultan's mule, etc., etc., etc. Well, that's the default position. The asal is kitab and sunnah. The asal of kitab and sunnah is to obey the ruler as long as it isn't disobedience. So that's the starting point. When you don't listen to the ruler, is it permissible to revolt and rebel in certain circumstances and in scenarios, etc.? That isn't the default. That's the exception. So you can't call someone who's calling the people to obey and to hear and to obey the Muslim ruler bad names. You can't disrespect them, because that's the foundation. And of course, the other side of those who say that you have to listen and obey a ruler who's a kafir, whether he's an outward kafir, whether he's an apostate, whatever the case may be. What are you talking about? People in America, they say you can't protest. Protesting is haram. What's the proof that protesting is haram? They say you're disobeying the ruler. You're inciting the people. The ruler isn't Muslim. Are you stupid? What are you talking about? It's a kafir ruler. So there's a great deal of confusion, a great deal of ignorance, a great deal of mixing and jumbling, a great deal of throwing apples and oranges together sloppily, aggressively throwing them upon who differs with you, your opponent, different dawah groups, different political organizations, etc., etc. Wala hawla wala quwwata illa billah. There is no escape unless you have sincerity, unless you're connected to Allah, unless you're being honest and open, and unless you learn the Quran and Sunnah. Other than that, you'll be picked off. You'll be a victim. You'll be a number. You'll be a statistic of the confusion, of the confused people, of the agenda pushers. This group, this scholar, this one, that one, he's from the Khawarij. He's a mudahid, a bootlicker. He's a apostate. He's the Islamic ruler. He's the caliph. There is no caliphate. There cannot be no caliphate. There won't be an etc., etc., etc. You'll be picked off. Allahul Musta'an. And the chances for the average Muslim to escape, to flee, and to be saved from this confusion and these filthy lies and these agendas of these different groups and people and scholars is very slim, in my humble opinion. Very slim. It's very slim. So you have to be sincere and honest with Allah and with yourself, and learn as much as you possibly can, and use your brain, use common sense, most importantly. So therefore, obeying the rulers, obviously the Muslim rulers, and of course the scholars of Islam have mentioned conditions for someone who is to be a Muslim ruler, and their levels of Muslim rulers from the highest to the lowest, as we explained in the previous lessons. All right, whether you call that person a caliph or sultan, etc. What are the conditions for a caliph? What makes a person an Islamic ruler, and what makes a person a legitimate Islamic ruler? That's a very interesting discussion in itself. Okay, many people ignore and neglect. Many people are ignorant. They don't have a clue. And anyone who's the leader of an Arab country, even though, as we said, he's secular constitution, they call him the Muslim ruler, the Islamic ruler. And that's obviously just plain stupidity. Allahumma musta'an. قال الله تعالى يا أيها الذين آمنوا أطيعوا الله وأطيعوا الرسول. And subhanallah, yani, here in this copy of Riyadh as-Saliheen, and this is a really, really, really bad mistake. It states, I'm going to read exactly what it says. يا أيها الذين آمنوا أطيعوا الله في المعصية الرسول وأولي الأمر منكم ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله. It is a horrible misquoting of this ayah. Major typo here from Surah An-Nisa, verse number 59. It says, "O you who believe, أطيعوا الله في المعصية, obey Allah in disobedience, the messenger, and those who are in authority from among you." How in the world is this type of typo or misquoting of the ayah from the Quran? How did it make it to the printed version? This is extremely unfortunate. But obviously we know that the ayah says, "Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu," O you who believe, أطيعوا الله, obey Allah, وأطيعوا الرسول, and obey the messenger, وأولي الأمر منكم, and those who are in authority from among you. فإن تنازعتم في شيء, and if you differ on anything, then take it back to Allah and His Messenger. If you truly believe in Allah on the last day, that is to the end of the ayah. All right. So this ayah clearly mandates that it is mandatory, it's obligatory to obey Allah, absolutely, without any thinking, and obey the Messenger, absolutely, without any thinking or understanding, absolute obedience, purely 101%. And thirdly, you must obey the rulers, those who are in authority from among you, conditionally. And the proof that it's only conditional is that Allah did not repeat ati'u, obey, a third time. He only said obey twice. Allah, His Messenger, absolute obedience. Rulers, restricted, conditional obedience. And if you differ on anything, the verse clearly shows that it's going to happen. Humans are going to differ. Humans are going to fight. It's inevitable. Then take it back to Allah and His Messenger. Take it back to the Kitab and the Sunnah. Take it back to the closest, purest, most orthodox understanding that you can possibly find. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He clearly explains to us, He tells us what to do if and when we differ. And it isn't necessarily a matter of if, but it's when. We shouldn't differ. We should try our best not to differ. We should try to minimize our differences, but it's inevitable as a human being. Sometimes going to come in which you, Fulan and Fulana, aren't going to see eye to eye. That's how things are. So what do we do when that happens? Okay, khair inshallah. So the ayah tells us is that it's mandatory to obey Allah and to obey the messenger without any thinking. Do you understand the command? It doesn't matter. And if you want to use the word dogmatic, then that's what the word you can use. But the rulers, there is no dogmatic obedience to them. There is no, he said it in it, khalas. No, it only pertains to that which is ma'ruf. All right, that which is known and acceptable in Islam, Kitab, Sunnah, according to the sound intellect, and according to the pure fitrah. End of discussion. All right, so people who are fanatical to their rulers and their leaders, no matter how great and how brave they are, how wise they are, how well they are put together, there's never a time in which you are allowed to obey another human being absolutely, period. It just doesn't exist. And of course, there are countless sad examples of this in history in which people fanatically, blindly follow their rulers, their generals, and of course, we know the result of that. The spiritual decay, the sins, your scale of bad deeds, let alone the destruction and the ruin in this world. You lost the battle because you followed those orders without thinking. It can't just be, oh, I'm a soldier, my job isn't to think, I just do. Soldiers aren't the politicians. Soldiers aren't the generals, the commanders. Okay, no problem. A private isn't a lieutenant, a sergeant. But you have to use your brain. Allah gave you a brain. And you can't just blindly follow anyone or any man without thinking. Allah musta'an. Tayyib, khair inshallah. So the ayah is clear. As far as the hadiths, Nawawi, he quotes the first hadith عن ابن عمر رضي الله عنهما عن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم أنه قال على المرء المسلم السمع وطاعته فيما أحب وكره إلا أن يؤمر بمعصية فإذا أمر بمعصية فلا سمع ولا طاعة متفق عليه. Abdullah bin Umar رضي الله عنهما reports, the Messenger of Allah صلى الله عليه وسلم says على المرء المسلم, upon the Muslim man, السمع والطاعة is hearing and obeying فيما أحب وكره, whether you like it or whether you dislike it. You must hear, you must listen, you must obey the Islamic ruler, whether you like the commands or you don't like the commands. You dislike the commands. إِلَّا أَن يُؤْمَرَ بِمَعْصِيَةٍ, unless he's commanded to disobey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Then he doesn't have to listen and he doesn't have to obey. فَإِذَا أُمِرَ بِمَعْصِيَةٍ, and if and when your ruler commands you to do something which is haram, which is against Islam, against Quran and Sunnah, فَلَا سَمْعَ وَلَا طَاعَةَ, or وَلَا طَاعَةَ, then there's khalas. I can't obey you, I'm sorry. How dare you disobey? How dare you not implement I'm sorry, beat me, lock me up, kill me, do what you will. But you don't have that status. Allah did not give you that absolute obedience. I'm sorry. And this hadith is in Bukhari and Muslim. The hadith is totally authentic and it is clear as day. Clear as day. So if a person says the Muslims must obey their rulers, then they're speaking haqq, and that haqq must be accepted. You can't call that person a name or try to scandalize them. Now, the question may come or arise, who and what is the ruler? What makes a ruler a legitimate Islamic ruler? Just because he's a president or prime minister or king or queen? And that's a discussion in itself. An Islamic ruler. And as we said in a previous class, even if the ruler isn't Islamic, and let's say for argument's sake the ruler is a disbeliever and an apostate, that doesn't mean that you just go and try to remove that person if you don't have the means to remove them with minimal damage and minimal loss. We mentioned an example of a loose tooth, a tooth that's been injured or a tooth that's coming out. You can pull it out with a little bit of pain, a little bit of difficulty, versus you yanking the tooth out and you're ripping your gums and there's plenty of blood and nerve endings. Even when there's time to revolt and to rebel and to remove this wicked ruler, it has to be done in a proper manner and not in a manner in which will cause a slaughter of countless lives and destruction of infrastructure. And the list goes on. Total chaos. Wallahu musta'an. Next hadith, Nawawi says, وعنه قال كنا إذا بايعنا رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم على السمع والطاعة يقول لنا فيما استطعتم متفق عليه. Abdullah bin Umar also said that the Messenger of Allah صلى الله عليه وسلم, when we gave him our bay'ah, our oath of allegiance, we swore. We gave to him, we swore fealty to him, allegiance. And we'll listen and we'll obey no matter what. And the Prophet ﷺ said, فِيمَ اسْتَطَعْتُمْ, only based off of your capabilities. Don't give an absolute allegiance that you're going to do it no matter what, except you have the ability to do it. And this hadith is in the Bukhari and Muslim as well, and it's crystal clear, as that there is no absolute obedience to someone outside of the Messenger of Allah ﷺ, period. And if the leader puts unreasonable demands upon the subjects aren't required to obey him. End of discussion. Third hadith, he says, وعنه قال سمعت رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم يقول من خلع يد من طاعة لقي الله يوم القيامة ولا حجة له ومن مات وليس في عنقه بيعة مات ميتة جاهلية. رواه مسلم. وفي رواية له ومن مات وهو مفارق للجماعة فإنه يموت ميتة جاهلية. الميتة بكسر الميم. Ibn Umar radiallahu anhuma also reports, and this hadith is in Sahih Muslim, I heard the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, whoever removes his hand from obeying his ruler, ta'a, whoever doesn't obey the ruler, he refuses to obey, on the day of judgment, he will meet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, la hujjata lahu, and he won't have anything to say on his behalf. His soul will be ruined. He won't be able to beg or to cry or to make any excuse in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when he meets Allah. La hujjata lahu. He'll be in trouble. He'll be in peril. وَمَنْ مَاتَ وَلَيْسَ فِي عُنُقِهِ بَيْعَةٌ, and whoever dies without making an oath of allegiance, without making a bay'ah to the ruler, he will die in a state of jahiliyyah. He will die in a state of pre-Islamic ignorance. He'll die as if he died in the dark ages before Islam. And that hadith, once again, is in Sahih Muslim. The highlighting point from the hadith establishes a severe threat, wa'id shadid, a severe threat for those, number one, who refuse to obey the ruler, and number two, those who do not give oath of allegiance to that ruler. So both of these things are major sins, and they're obligatory to perform the opposite. That's what we benefit from this hadith. Khairan inshallah ta'ala, another version of this hadith states, whoever dies whilst mufariqun lil jama'ah, he's splitting the ranks of the congregation, he's outside of the body of the Muslims, he will die in a state of jahiliyyah. Whether that mean he's a kafir, he's an apostate, or whether that mean he's imitating the disbelievers in their actions, what's important is it's a severe threat. So these hadiths clearly prove that it's mandatory to obey the ruler, to listen to the ruler, as long as it isn't disobedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So if the ruler tells you to do anything, even if it isn't obligatory, even if it doesn't pertain to the religion, as long as it isn't haram, you must obey. You must obey. Now, as we said before, the problems that we have concerning who is a legitimate ruler, what makes a person an Islamic ruler, that's a different discussion. But if you consider this person to be your Islamic ruler, your Muslim ruler, you have to listen. And you can't say, I'm not going to obey because of this reason and because of that reason. All right? Khairan. So the correct path, the way, of course, is always in the middle. It's balanced. And before we move forward in the chapter, this also goes to show and goes to prove is that what's meant by the way of Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah, Madhab Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah, Manhaj Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah, Madhab as-Salaf is nothing more than Kitab and Sunnah. That's what it is. It's Kitab and Sunnah. It isn't something foreign or additional or exotic. It's sticking to the Quran and Sunnah. When the different groups and the different schisms and denominations, and when the different sects they came up and they bore, their ugly heads, etc., reared their ugly heads, and they used philosophy, or they used their opinions, or their dreams, or what their shuyukh said, and the Sahaba and the Tabi'een, the early generations, they say, we will stick to what's in Quran and Sunnah. That is the way of the Salaf. It's Quran and Sunnah. Following the Quran and Sunnah in the organic way, without the GMO. No, we're going to grow our own vegetables, eat our own vegetables. We're not using this type of chemical pesticide. Even though you're saying you have to use pesticides. You have to genetically modify. Nope. La wa shukran. So that's what's meant by the madhab of the Salaf, is following the Quran and the Sunnah. Wallahu ta'ala a'lam. Another issue here is the concept of Islamic government. And how many people think and they feel just because they live in a non-Muslim country or live in America, I can pray my 5 prayers, I can make hajj, I can fast, I pay my zakah, I eat halal meat, I'm practicing Islam. That's it. Khalas, I've done my obligation. That's wrong. That's incorrect. Making the 5 daily prayers is extremely important. That's the foundation of the religion, no doubt about that. Fasting, zakah, is all important, but that's not all what Islam is. Islam is more than that. It's much more than that. So if you think that your religion is complete, living in a non-Muslim land, just because you can implement the 5 pillars and get married and eat halal chicken, you're sadly mistaken. And from that, is the concept of Islamic government, Islamic rulership, and that the Muslims are not to be living in this scattered manner in which they live. The Muslims are supposed to live in a place in which there is a ruler who rules over them, who guides them, protects them, commands them according to Quran and Sunnah, and they are to have bay'ah to him. So, we have the concept of hijrah, we have the concept of al-jihad, we have the concept of khilafah, and all of these different things that are so controversial today. And once again, there's a great deal of confusion concerning these matters. And we have zealots and extremists, far right, far left, concerning jihad. Far left concerning jihad, far right concerning hijrah, etc. What's important is we are not living in the manner in which Allah wants us to live. That's the end of the discussion. It's difficult, it's hard, we don't have the money, the Muslim countries are in shambles, etc., etc. Okay, no problem, sahih. But what are we doing to change that? What are we doing to establish these obligations? Whoever dies without having bay'ah to an Islamic ruler dies in a state of jahiliyyah. What are we doing to change that? We aren't trying to change that. Rather, we are pleased, we are complacent of living the way that we live. In the West, under non-Muslim kuffar protection. In the Middle East, under secular, modern, progressive, un-Islamic rulership, and we're happy. As long as we can make hajj, we can eat halal chicken, halal lamb. My son is getting married. I send my son to school and I pay my rent, my mortgage, and that's it. That's Islam. And unfortunately, that's an extremely sad state. And the people who call to the way of this scholar or this imam or reviving this or following the Salaf as-Salih, you have to call to everything. Everything. Not just this issue of aqidah, but to all of it. Right? Next hadith. The author, Nawawi rahimahullah ta'ala, he says, وعن أنس رضي الله عنه قال قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم اسمعوا وأطيعوا وإن استؤمن عليكم عبد حبشي كأن رأسه زبيبة رواه البخاري. Anas radiallahu anhu reports, and this hadith is in Sahih Bukhari, listen and obey your ruler, even if an Abyssinian slave is the one who's commanding you, if he's your ruler. Follow your ruler, listen to your ruler, even if it's an Abyssinian slave, كَأَنَّ رَأْسَهُ زَبِيبَةٌ, as if his head was a raisin. As if his head was a raisin. The highlighting point from this hadith, the main lesson from this hadith, once again, is the obligation of obeying the ruler, the Islamic ruler, the legitimate ruler, regardless of what this person looks like, and regardless of their background, and regardless of how you like or dislike that person, regardless of this individual's lineage, noble, low, peasant, black, white, Persian, Arab, Berber, the one who's the Islamic ruler must be obeyed. End of discussion. So this hadith, it teaches us how to be professionals. My boss is my boss. I don't like the way my boss looks. He's ugly. Or my boss is black. He's dark skin, thick lips, big nose, nappy, peasy hair. I don't like my boss. He's an N-word, right? Let's be honest. He's an etc. Need I say the word? I don't like the way my boss looks. But your boss is still your boss. My boss is white. He's a white devil. He has pale skin. He has a red face. He has a long nose. Blah, 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 blah. Wrinkles and freckles on his face. He's a white devil from the Caucasus Mountains. He's still your boss. My boss is an Arab. Arab people are stupid and slow and backwards. They're hairy and stinky. They're this and they're that. He's still your boss. I don't want to follow this person. This person is a Persian. They're from Iran. Persians are inferior to Arabs, etc., etc. Chinese, Japanese, and the list goes on and on and on and on and on of jahiliyyah, of how people look at themselves as being superior and look at others as being inferior and look at their blood and their stock as the thing which qualifies them for position and status. It's a huge, huge, huge problem and a very long discussion, and it's all from jahiliyyah. The Prophet tells us the one who's in charge, the head honcho, the HNIC, you have to listen to, you have to obey, even if you don't like what they look like. And even if you consider them to be of lower lineage than that of yours. First and foremost is, look at the balagha of the hadith, abdun, a slave. How can a slave be the ruler of free men? In any society, black, white, yellow, green, purple, he's a slave. Among Abyssinians, East Africans, North Africans, West Africans, Central Africans, South Africans, is a slave. A slave is a slave. So we all have the same skin complexion. We're all very dark. We're all African, sub-Saharan African, but this man is a slave. He can't command me. I'm free. Let alone I'm noble. I'm a king. I'm a prince, etc. Abdun, a slave. In all different societies that practice slavery, a slave didn't have the rights of a free man. That's well known. Ancient Rome, Greece, wherever you go, a person is a slave. They aren't the same as a free man. How can this person be a ruler? Let alone, how do we even have to listen to him and obey him? And then on top of him being a slave, Habashiyun, he's a black slave, an African slave, i.e., the Prophet ﷺ is speaking to the Arabs who, for centuries, enslaved Africans themselves, bought Africans from other Africans, raided, traded, whatever the case may be. Slavery is well known between Arabia and the Horn of Africa. Egypt, modern-day Sudan, Somalia, Eritrea, Djibouti, right? Yemen, Oman, current-day Saudi Arabia, so on and so forth. This is well known. Iraq, they traded slaves, well known. Oman, right? Read the history of the Muscat Kingdom. Read the history of the Omani Sultanate and how many slaves they took from Zanzibar. And you'll be shocked if you read the history of it and how late slavery was abolished in the Middle East and in the Arab countries. What's important is the trading of slaves, slave traffic is well known in that part of the world for years. And in most cases, Allah knows best, I think it's pretty safe to say that the majority of slaves were probably sub-Saharan Africans, black Africans. Did Arabs have other Arabs as slaves? Allahu Alam. Of course, we talk about North Africa, the Barbary Coast, many different Muslims there, Berbers, Arabs there. They had all types of white Caucasian slaves. And the Ottoman Empire, the Seljuk Empire, they had all types of white slaves from Russia, from these different Eastern European countries, Romania, Hungary, and the list goes on. White slaves, they preferred. But right now, we're talking about black slaves. And that's a long discussion with regards to Africans selling other Africans to Arabs, but are Arabs selling Arabs to Africans. And that should wake you up. I'm selling my people to them, but are they selling theirs to you? That's a deep, painful question that not too many people want to answer. We're selling ours to them. We're getting rid of our political opponents, these prisoners, this rebel person, this one who's fighting for the throne. He's captured. Let me sell him to the Arabs. Let me get rid of him. But every time you sell a black slave to these Arabs, you're doing nothing but whetting their appetite for more black slaves to be castrated and women to become sex slaves, concubines, to mate with Arabs, and the list goes on. But are they selling Arabs to you? So slavery is a very long discussion, a very painful discussion. Not too many people know what they're talking about when they talk about slavery. They're not honest. They don't keep it real. They blame slavery just on white people. They blame slavery just on Arab people. They blame slavery just on black people, and the list goes on. Allah Musta'an. Long discussion, momentous discussion concerning slavery. What's important is the Arabs had slaves like all other nations. And in most cases, 90% of the time, the slaves were black. They're from Africa. So, number one, following and listening to a slave ruler, that's a problem. He's a slave, not a free man, let alone someone who's high-born, but he's a slave. And then on top of him being a slave, he's an African slave. Even worse. And Arabs' scorn of sub-Saharan Africans, black people, call it, is well known. And their culture, their language, their lines of poetry is well known. How they utterly look down upon black people and black color. Black skin is aib in itself. To have dark skin itself is ugly. Not this person is dark skinned and they don't look that. I don't like the way she looks. She's not really attractive to me. Her weight, her height. No. But the sheer act of a woman having dark skin is qubh. She's ugly just because she has dark skin. It's a reality. Anyone who's lived overseas, he knows this to this very day. And a person who has fair skin is beautiful, no matter what. Whether they're ugly or not, whether they're obese, short, tall, skinny, doesn't matter. Fair skin is lovely. It's a reality. All right. So the concept of Arabs looking down upon African people and not liking the way that they look is well known, is documented. So strike one is a slave. Strike two, Habashi, African, sub-Saharan African. Strike three, كأن رأسه زبيبة. He's deformed basically. He's in a grotesque, unsightly image. I can't bear to look at his face. Not only is he a slave, not only is he black, but he's ugly. His head is all messed up and shriveled, whatever the case may be. You still have to listen and follow that ruler. So as if the Prophet ﷺ saying in this hadith, you have to follow the ruler in the most extreme condition. So if you have to do that in the most extreme condition, then what do you think you have to do with the ruler who isn't in the most extreme condition? Who is highborn, noble birth? Who is of your same race? You can't choose and pick when you want to listen to him. Inshallah ta'ala, hopefully it is clear what's meant by this hadith. We've explained this hadith before on different occasions. Many people think and they feel that Islam supports racism and colorism. And the Prophet ﷺ said jarring remarks towards black people and African people, so on and so forth. The Prophet ﷺ, he spoke to the Sahaba in their language and according to their culture. All right. And as I said before, and I'll say one more time, hopefully for the last time, it's a very long discussion concerning slavery and concerning color and blackness, all right, in Islam and the Muslims, all right, and the many woes of history concerning that. Wallahu al-musta'an. Next hadith is the hadith of Abu Hurairah. He says, وعن أبي هريرة رضي الله عنه قال قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم عليك السمع وطاعته في عسرك ويسرك ومنشطك ومكرهك وأثرة رواه Muslim. Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu narrates that the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, it is upon you to listen and to obey when things are easy, when things are difficult, when things are going well, when there's smooth sailing, and when the waters are very choppy. You have to obey. When it's good or when it's bad. When you're enthused, you have high energy, or when you're lazy and slack, you have to obey. وَأَثَرَةٍ. And you also have to obey even if the ruler is stingy. Even if he's stingy. Even if he isn't giving you your rights. أَثَرَةٍ. He's demanding his and he isn't giving anything to you. You still have to obey. So this shows us obeying the ruler is an Islamic obligation. And it's not about an issue of preference. He's a good ruler, we'll listen and we'll obey. La. It is not about being convenient. It's not about convenience. And this hadith, Nawawi rahimahullah ta'ala, he says, is collected by Imam Muslim. And before we move forward, there are many, many hadiths in the chapter. We're not going to mention all of them. What's important is the importance of reading the text. The importance of reading the Quran and the Sunnah. Listening to this lecture, reading this fatwa, listening to this one's rhetoric, listen to the Kitab and Sunnah. And you'll find the cure and you'll find the solution to many problems concerning the dawah confusion just by reading the text. And there are many things which are fake and bogus and incorrect just by reading. You'll find it out just by reading the text. Those who say there is no obedience to the ruler if he's a bad ruler. You can revolt and rebel because the person isn't given the things that the people deserve. So if you have basic knowledge of Islam, you're going to say, wait a second, that don't sound too right. Because I know I read clearly that the Prophet ﷺ said A, B, C. So people, they always ask us, how do I know that I'm following the correct dawah? How do I know that I'm following the correct aqidah? How do I know who to listen to? How do I know that I should be listening to this person? How do I know? Well, first and foremost, if you're a layman, if you don't have the correct knowledge, you're really not going to know. But there are ways and there are steps. First and foremost, we mentioned before, sincerity. You got to be sincere. Be honest with yourself. Be honest with Allah. Do you really want to follow the truth? Or you want to follow someone who's the most handsome, who wears the best cologne, who's the fanciest. I follow the sheikh because he has really fair skin. It's a reality. He has really, really fair skin, and I like the way he looks. I listen to this scholar because he's black, because he's from my people. That may be an incentive, but that isn't sincerity. I'm listening to this person because I truly, honestly feel in my heart that I'm getting closer to Allah through his teachings. I feel like a good slave of Allah. I feel close to Allah when I listen to this class. Sincerity. That's number one. The truth. Number two is that you must know the basics of Islam yourself. And you don't have to be a scholar to learn the basics of your religion. And here we see the basics of the religion. Riyadh as-Saliheen is in English. There's no reason why you can't read this book. This person is calling to this, which is clearly in contradiction of the authentic hadith that you've read. Number three, you must have common sense. Strong common sense. Use your brain. How does it make sense what this person is saying? Last but not least is trust. There are things above your pay grade, over your head, things that you aren't qualified to understand and discuss. You must have someone that you trust. And obviously trusting that scholar or that caller, that da'iyah, that goes back to the first point, which is sincerity. As you sincerely believe that this person is knowledgeable and learning. Not perfect, not an angel from heaven, but I sincerely believe he's a good person. And I sincerely believe that this person is honest and he wouldn't lie to me and he wouldn't twist the knowledge to suit his desires or for money. He may do that behind closed doors. I don't know. That which is between him and himself behind closed doors. La adri, I don't know. But outwardly, I believe that he's a good person and an honest person. So, number one, sincerity. Number two, good, solid, fundamental knowledge of Islam. Number three, good, solid, common sense. Number four, trust. And of course, you can add a fifth principle to this if you wanted to. I call these the four golden principles for the layman Muslim. Wallahu ta'ala a'lam. Khairan, inshallah ta'ala. We're going to stop here. There are many, many hadiths in the chapter, let alone the hadiths not mentioned in the chapter. And of course, the other hadith talk about a reality. The Prophet ﷺ gives us preemptive guidance concerning when the rulers demand their rights, but they're stingy in giving us our rights. What do we do? The Prophet gives us a solution to that as well. As I said before, this is a branch and a further discussion, or a furthering of Islamic politics and the chaos and the disarray of Islamic politics today. Not from Islam, but from the Muslims today. This issue is a branch of that. Allahumma sta'an, we ask Allah for guidance. Allah surely knows best, and with him is all success.